Tom, we finally got Mike Deaton in a room, but
I know. It's
I'd
been a
rather be on a
while.
mountain with him. I'd rather be on a mountain.
I know.
I just got back 30 minutes
Same.
ago from this for just grabbed a quick shower, ready for the call.
Yeah, every time I see your content on LinkedIn, I'm like, man, I think I want to move to Colorado. And then I see you in the winters, I'm like, man, I really like New York.
There is a downside.
Yes. I am a skier, but then I wouldn't get any work done. So it's like,
Right.
it's a
That
little
is
half
that
and
is
half.
the primary downside.
Yeah. Well, we jumped into it, but why don't you let the folks know who you are, what you do, and maybe what makes you different in the things that you do.
Yeah. So I've had a journey. I've a journey that started probably like most Americans. I pretty normal childhood, middle class type family. Went to university, got my degree. Didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Stumbled into work. Stumbled until I found a foothold in a career. That was largely in big tech companies in the operations side of things, and so I was with Motorola when Motorola was a really big pager and cell phone company in the manufacturing plant, and that was in Central Texas. I moved to Nokia when Nokia became king of cell phones, which predates probably anybody listening to this call or podcast.
Yeah,
And
we're
then
old.
I finished my career, at least in the corporate world, with Microsoft running their supply chains in the Americas for their hardware products like Xboxes and different PCs and different things like that. That was kind of my life was, and that was what I thought life was. You have a job, you have a salary, you get promotions, you climb the ladder, you have a safety net, you have benefits, you have a 401k that you're just feeding, and you have some vision of retirement at some point, and hopefully. And then in 2016, I had previous to that given out plenty of layoffs, and finally my number came up. I was part of the layoff for reduction at Microsoft. It was a little bit voluntary. Like I was living in Dallas Fort Worth. We had a really small office. For me to go anywhere, I needed to go to Washington to be part of corporate office, and it just wasn't really anything I wanted to do. So I exited. But my immediate
Mhm.
reaction was really, I got to get a job. And so I started interviewing with Amazon and Tesla and Apple and other tech companies. And I just had this pit in my stomach in terms of like, what's the company culture going to be like? It was already pretty bad at Microsoft. What have you done for me lately? Um, I heard horror stories about all these other tech companies. And I was already traveling about 50% of the month on business travel, international trips. And was I going to have to be doing more of that? And so all of that led me to, at the behest of my lovely wife, by the way, who's so supportive, to kind of take a step back and think about, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. There are other paths in life. And so we started thinking about, what are our values as people? What do we want as a couple? What do we want our perfect day to look like in this next chapter of our lives? And those exercises, which we did tangible exercises with, not just thought experiments, created a vision that didn't go down the corporate path. And so that all led us into entrepreneurship. And that's where I got into real estate, land flipping, what we do today, lately some coaching. But that's kind of been my journey. I would say today's world, what makes me unique is really all of that background. So I have an operations background. I love
Mhm.
running businesses. I ran businesses within those businesses, right? I had a business line, I had a budget, I had a staff, I had people. And so I wasn't a CEO per se, but I was a director, I was a senior director. And so I have this skill set that helps me run a business at the executional level, right? Managing a P&L, making sure your cash is flowing, things are running, and then also an ability to direct. And so that's, I think, why our land business has been fairly successful relative to many that I see get into the space. And now as a coach, I try to help people with that. I also, similar to you guys, I have a passion for personal development, and I just love the mindset side of things because I've struggled with it. And so that also is something that I try to instill in our coaching business is not just the nuts and bolts of how to run a business, but how to push through barriers. Very similar to you guys. Like it's not it's very rarely the tactics that trip people up in a business. It's getting in your own way. It's the doubt. It's all of those softer type skills that really, and that's where I love that we lacked that when we started our land business. We had a coach who was a blocking and tackling type of a thing, and fortunately, Lygia and I had each other to help
Right.
pull ourselves along that journey. But, now we try to differentiate ourselves from other land coaches in that way. So we try to do a healthy dose of performance management and help people get through those kind of things. So that's nutshell version.
Yeah, and I'm sure this may not seem right to you, but it seems like you're one of nobody. Like, I don't know any other people that are buying or focusing as much on purchasing land. I know a ton of real estate investors. Tom and I are on the advisory board for a real estate investment firm. We're not just advisor boards; we're also investors. Future Gen, little plug. But the thing is, you hear so many developers or real estate investors or multifamily or fix and flip. And I very rarely ever hear anybody in the land business. And someone said this once, buy land because God isn't making any more of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did you get into that space and not end up in some other entrepreneurial venture?
Yeah. It's a great origin story. So, first of all, there are other land investors. There's many other land investors. There's other coaching programs.
Hmm.
As you guys know, when you're in something, it can almost feel hyper competitive. Like, oh my God, there's so
Yes.
many people doing this. But when you zoom out, yes, land is a tiny niche within the whole real estate ecosystem, which is great, which is what makes it I call it the best kept secret in real estate because the returns are far better than house flipping or other things. Like you make a lot more money and you do a lot less work and you face a lot less competition. But my journey started, I would say, for me, there were two parallel paths. Um, 2016 was our inflection point when I got laid off. Actually, within days, Lygia also got laid off from her company, and so we were, all of our income stopped, and that was our inflection point. Prior to that, I had revisited Rich Dad Poor Dad, which a lot of people are really familiar with. And it really awakened this whole concept of the cash flow quadrant and salaried type income versus investing in business ownership type income. And it really started me thinking about, gosh, I should explore ways to generate income. What is that going to look like for me? And so I started digesting a lot of podcasts just like this and trying to expose myself to a lot of different ideas. And in that journey, I'm also a runner. And so I have time to digest a lot of podcasts while I'm out, spending a lot
Hmm.
of time running or training. And I was listening to people like Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income. There's a couple of others. Side Hustle Nation, I think, is another podcast that I was taking at the time. And I heard these people doing land flipping. And it sounded crazy. And I was like, wow, but they were making a lot of money and they weren't having to invest a lot of money up front, which was also a low barrier to entry, high return on your investment.
Right.
And I was intrigued. I invested in a little toolkit. I think I spent $1,000 and it was like a kind of an end to end education piece. And, back in the day, it came as a literal paper binder with DVDs. And in those days, you actually had a DVD player on your computer that you could put
Yep.
things in. So, but I didn't do anything with it. It came in the mail. I kind of flipped through it. I maybe looked at one of the DVDs and I just put it on the back of the desk because I was working full time. And I'm the type of guy who I'm all in. I mean, when I was working at Microsoft, I was 150%. I was nighttime looking at emails, checking. We'd wake up in the middle of the night. Hey, has anything happened? And so I felt guilty if I was trying to build something on the side, honestly. And so, for me, that layoff event really was instrumental because I don't think I would have developed something in parallel on the side. It's not really my personality. But
Right.
the Rich Dad Poor Dad thing, having just some exposure to land flipping and then the layoff really teed up this pivot into land investing specifically. And also, I have two daughters. They're adults now. They were university age at that time. And so my floor to my safety net really changed because I didn't feel the need to provide for them specifically. Their college was already, the nest egg was there. Um, Lygia has a really high risk tolerance. She comes from a different background. And so all those factors really allowed, at least opened the door for entrepreneurship. We stepped into it, but it opened that window or that door for us to try something different, and land was just right there. And so we just said, "Hey, let's give ourselves 12 months. Let's put some seed money into a business and let's start a journey." And that journey for us was plugging into a community, getting a coach, and learning the process and having somebody help start our business and ramp it up. And yeah, I mean, the we proved the business model out, and we had some success in that first 12 months, enough so that we said, okay, this has potential to sustain us as a replacement income.
Yeah. Mike, what was you had so much happen in such a short amount of time. What were some of the beliefs, or what was like the key belief that needed to change about yourself or that you thought in order to take these steps? Because so many people in your situation would have been stuck or would have been very paralyzed by the whole event. What was the thing that like you had to change believing in so that you could do this?
It's a great question. And there are a few factors. One I mentioned was kind of the safety net risk factor. I have a need for financial safety. Like, I have too much money in the bank that's doing nothing, but it gives me comfort knowing that I have a runway if something were to happen. And so at that moment, and part of this is probably because as a young adult, um, like right when I started working, my first wife and I were not responsible with credit, and we got ourselves into debt. And we spent, like most people, I think, we spent like decades carrying revolving balances on our credit cards, paying minimum or close to minimum, with all the other trappings of life, a mortgage, cars, vacations. And we were kind of, in a sense, living paycheck to paycheck. We didn't really have a huge savings account. We were doing some of the right things, but it was so stressful for me. That's not my proclivity. Is like, I don't like that. I can't stand it. It gave me so much stress and apprehension, and it was kind of instrumental into one of the reasons why that marriage didn't really work in the end. But for other reasons, in this next chapter of my life, I did get financially healthy. I had, investments. I had a healthy bank account. I didn't carry debt, and so in that moment, it was a bit of a crisis feeling. But I had years of means if I needed it, and so that alone was at least something that opened the door. But the whole belief system is a real conversation to have, because, like, as an employee, you live in a different world, right? You are
Yep.
performing, you're
Very.
working other people's goals, you're delivering things, you're, at a director level, you're still, you have some agency, and you are taking company vision and goals and translating it into your department and your division and things like that. And so I had a little bit of a bridge into that. But as an entrepreneur, it's all on you. And so for us, those early days, those were the big things about, okay, we have to have a KPI dashboard and know what we're chasing. We have to have, we still to this day have quarterly goals. We have a monthly business review. We start each week with a monthly meeting. We have a little daily huddle in the morning when we start our workday. What are we going to do? X, Y, and Z. And so we have a lot of the frameworks that happen, but it was really a lot of those self management type um, behaviors that had to come in. But from a belief system, that is really something that I have had to work on. That I have the ability to effectively manage a company or a business. And I still
Hmm.
to this day work on that. I mean, I have a little bit of imposter syndrome, or, as business grows and scales, you're going up into another level and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't ever managed a business of this size before, or what if something bad happens, or whatever. And so I'm continually having to anchor on the fact that I do have skills and I have knowledge and I have resources in terms of, people like you, or community, whether it's digital or real or whatever, that you can tap into and grow. And plasticity is another element of, I have the ability to grow into things that I haven't done before. And so those are really essential things that I still to this day, I enjoy working on them, thankfully, but I have to kind of work on those. And that's one of the biggest shifts, right? I mean, you come from a world of being told largely what to do, to, okay, now I have to decide, who am I hiring? What's my marketing plan? Um, what's our blue ocean strategy, or our competitive advantage, or things like that. And it's fun, but it's also comes with its own burden of sorts. And so, entrepreneurship, especially on the social medias, it looks nice, and it's nice to show we just got back from England. Hey, look at me, I'm whatever. But on the day to day, okay, I'm stressing about where's our next sale coming from, keeping the pipeline going, and things like that. So
It's interesting as you said it, because this is what we experience with many, many of our clients and people that we've gotten to know at our masterminds and stuff. Is they've transitioned from some level of employment into business ownership. Very rare do we come across people that were like right into entrepreneurship. And I think that's just rare in general. You usually go out there in the world, you get some
I
experience, you
think
get some
that's
skill.
transitioning a little bit, just because the playing field, like in 2016. Well, let's go back to 2010 or something. I mean, being an entrepreneur meant almost having a brick and mortar
Yes.
office and a physical
Yes.
product offering. Or if it was a software service or something, it was a lot of investment.
Hmm.
Now it's really transitioning. And so I do think more and more you see people that take that as a path,
Yeah.
or at least want
I,
to.
I even talked to my kids. Yeah, I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we started having kids a little later. I'm 47, but so I talked to them and I say, I think there's a huge opportunity in the world. Whether you choose to do this or not doesn't make a difference, but I think there's an opportunity that you can have a lot of individualistic businesses out there of people that are really good at a craft, a skill, or solving a problem that can do it on their own and can collaborate with other people that may need that one specific thing. And I even looked at it as I run my past businesses, I had departments. I had people that handled my sales, my customer care, my transaction and deal flow, and all these things. I think even those little departments could be their own entrepreneur that now I utilize, and not in a fractional way that we see a lot of this. I see a lot of fractional. This
Yeah, yeah,
CEO
yeah. It's
fractional,
buzzword of the
CFO.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that path allows people who had a skill set to take it and utilize it for others who need it, and still have a sense of freedom and ownership and agency, as you said before. And that's where I think people are getting skills much earlier now. So this is why I think people are compelled to start businesses, because knowledge is at their fingertips. I watch what my children can do now, and I'm like, I was like in my 20s when I could do stuff like that. It's really impressive, and they're getting expertise in certain areas. When we were kids, I went out and I played in the yard and I rode my bike, and I went and I watched the same 5 channels, and I was the remote control. I had to get up and turn the channel. Like
You're not
now
that
it's
old.
just they can really, my children and any younger people can, even us now, you can dig so deep into something
Mm.
where you actually learn a skill, and then the application of that, as you said, there is a very low barrier of entry to start producing anything, whether it's your writing or content or actually becoming a service provider or whatever it is. So I truly believe you're right. There is a drastic shift in that. But when you were doing it, you already came from employment and years of employment and really good employment at a high level with big, well known companies. When you shift over to now to entrepreneurship, I can appreciate that because I was a financial planner for many years. The safety net, and I love that you said, I really appreciate that you said I have too much money in the bank that could be doing something else. Because I used to have this phrase about
It's an
dead money,
emotional
but there are
attachment. Yeah. It's a
Yes.
there are people that have to have that safety net in there, and I can understand it. So you had the safety net, you had the skill set, you were
We have
going
a
in and
3% mortgage, but I wanna pay off my house. Like, it's like
right,
my brain tells me, "No, don't do that. Invest the money." And then my heart's like, "Yeah, but man, if you had no mortgage, think of how
right. Yeah,
better you'd
and that
sleep
is
at
totally
night."
fine. So as you transition to this entrepreneurship, yes, you have that safety net, you have this skill set. But the interesting thing that I heard as you talked about it was it's almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like you're almost still working for an employee, but the employee is your future self because you kept saying, I want to improve, I want to get better, I can learn things. And that's great to be aware of that. But to actually implement that is a whole nother story. And as I've watched your transition, I looked it up. We were on episode 43 of your podcast. I don't know what episode you're up to now, but that was a long time ago. But as I've watched your progress and what you've been doing, is you've stayed really steady, but you have these micro improvements all along the way. And it's almost like you've set KPIs for yourself. And that's what
Mhm.
we talk about a lot is where people have to be their own CEO, right? You have to be the boss and you can also be the janitor and you can also be the sales guy and the accountant guy and everything. And that's most of the people we experience is they're that. But I love how as you spoke to it, it was almost like you're still the employee. I'm still working towards all these things, but I have the freedom to go running and I have the ability to explore new things.
It's a very, astute observation, and it's very true. As I was mentioning before we hit record, like, we have kinda 2 broad businesses. We have a few more, but the main businesses for us are the land business, which is probably 90% of what we do. We buy and sell land still. It fuels our income and our lifestyle. In that instance, I'm very much a CEO. I'm directing. I'm very lightly touching base, setting strategy, approving a few things. I'm not really too hands-on unless a particular deal needs some eyes or something. In our coaching business, it's newer. We've been doing it a couple years. We're still, I would say, even finding our way a little bit, creating frameworks, learning, and in there, um, even in my corporate days, I worked for some amazing companies, and they were all heavily leadership focused. And that type of leadership mostly was very servant oriented. And it was such that, the CEO would pick up trash. You don't just walk by something and say, "Hey, go pick that up." You lean down and pick it up and you lead by example. And so I still like to do that very much in our business. And as you guys know, in a personal branding, coaching type environment, you do have to do a lot of things, right? You go on appearances like this, you make your own content. Least, at least for now, until you get the AI avatars good enough where you can just kind of go do that. But there are elements that you need to be involved in doing that, and so I do feel very much even more of an employee than I would like to be. But
Mm,
I realize I mean, I have a long runway in front of me. At least I hope I do, and so there's time for me to take the time to get things right? Get the frameworks right so that I can teach someone how to do it, or take the time to get the right person or the right system or whatever in place. But um, I also enjoy working. Like, I enjoy learning. Even if it's marketing strategy or whatever, it's fascinating to me to learn all that. If I have a flaw, I mean, it's strength and a weakness. But I've always been one who likes a breadth of knowledge. Like, I like to know something about almost everything, and very rarely do I like to go super deep in a certain channel. And so, I like to have my hands in a lot of different parts of the business, or even a lot of different businesses. I mean, Lidge and I talk about different avenues of things. How can we take advantage of AI wave? Is there a business opportunity there, totally unrelated to what we're doing, or maybe related? And so it holds us back in some ways, but it's my personality, my preference, and that's the way I wanna run my life. So that's the way I'm gonna do it.
It sounds like, Mike, you've shifted so many different identities. You have all these different businesses. You were an employee. Now you're in charge of this world that you live in, right?
Mm.
What was the thing that allowed you to shift that identity really more from employee to the man in charge kind of in that respect, because so many people that we see that start businesses, especially the people who started businesses since COVID, they were all employees, and they struggle with that identity shift to become that person that they want to be and be the CEO of their life and their business. And you have really taken on that identity. What was the thing that allowed what was it that allowed you to really do that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating reflection. I don't know that I know the answer to that for sure, but um, I mentioned Lygia being really supportive in that way, and as a part of our shift from both being employees into both starting businesses, co-founding businesses together. Excuse me. In that same period when we started our own business, we moved. We moved from our house in Plano, where I was born in Dallas Fort Worth area, not Plano and Fort Worth side, but my mom and dad lived there, our girls were there, friends and family. Our whole anchor and network was there. We moved from there to Colorado. And so I believe that that physical move and like extracting ourselves from
Mm,
a known group that had a certain expectation of an identity, allowed us to really pivot and not even hear about what other people think. I mean, I'm sure my mom and dad were like, "What the hell are you doing?" Kind of a thing, and
yeah,
so I think that fundamentally gave us the space, and then we plugged into communities that were in real estate and land investing, and all of that, I think, allowed the space to feel comfortable doing something radically different that was kind of freeing
yeah.
of the legacy um, attachments that friends and family carry.
You literally flip dirt. You know, your books are called Flipping Dirt, but you literally flip dirt. You physically moved from one place, took up your roots
Yeah.
from this place, and you found new roots. You planted new roots in a new place that was a better growing environment for you at that time in your life. That is fascinating. That's one of the best answers that we've gotten to that question. Like I just love that because you are embodying, you don't even realize it, you're embodying the whole concept of flipping dirt, like and what you say. But that's so critical. To a lot of people struggle with that because they're not willing to uproot themselves and change everything. They worry about what people are going to say, and all of that just becomes that acid rain that falls upon that ground that you're trying to fertilize. And you literally went to a new place to allow that to happen, to not listen or be subject to any of that toxicity, acidity. So that's amazing. And you did say a lot too, Lygia's support, and you always, even when we were on the podcast many episodes ago, with you on Cash Flow Fight Club, you know, you and Lygia have this beautiful relationship. You have this beautiful, like you're just not husband and wife. You really are partners. And like you said, she has a higher risk tolerance than you, and she compliments you. And I do think from my observation that the way you speak about it, that is another part of what helped you to shift your identity, was having that support of a trusted partner. And I think a lot of people lack that when they go through these transitions and these identity shifts, so to speak, to become the new person that they are.
Oh, without a doubt, 100%. I mean, her superpower is really that support and compliments and just yeah. I'm so fortunate that in this chapter, post divorce or whatever, I found a partner that is truly a partner, and so in many ways that has allowed us to go faster, farther, and just kind of create a life. But yeah, I mean, I think if you take an extreme example like addiction, a lot of times people come out of rehab programs, and unless they totally change their environment, they go back because all those ties are so strong, and people don't want to see you as a different person, especially your family, right? They're like, oh no, I have this whole thing. And so yeah, it wasn't necessarily an intentional move that I know of. It could have been a subconscious. Really, we
Mhm.
just, part of our reinvention was we wanted to be able to enjoy life while we felt like we were young enough to get out and hike in the mountains and go skiing and explore and do all the things. And we just felt, why don't we go to a place where we can do all that now and enjoy this freedom? But it was, very fundamental to being able to not cut, but at least ignore, expectations of others, cut those ties, and really do some reinvention
It
work.
makes a lot of sense. There was a study that was done for Vietnam War veterans that used heroin in Vietnam, and, they studied them when they came back to America. 95% of them did not use heroin again, and they were so worried about it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, all our boys are gonna come back and they're gonna be drug addicted and everything," and they're like, "No, it was just the environment." What they were saying is,
Mhm.
you become a product of your environment, nature, nurture, all these things, and sometimes you can do that situation where you're an American, you go to Vietnam, you start using heroin, and then you come back and you're fine. But other times, you don't know what's available to you if you change your environment. This is who you are. I mean, most people are born and raised in the same, 20-mile radius. It's incredible what you can do when you shift your environment around. And it doesn't mean I'm recommending anybody here get up and move and sell your house, but you can even experience different environments in your local environment. You can try different social settings. You can try, going to a different place, experience. You're going to say something like that.
I was just gonna say, there's the saying, you become the 5 people you hang around with or whatever, right? And it's I don't like it, but it has a lot of, truth to it. And so, if you hang with the dog, you get fleas, or you can, put yourself in the room where you're gonna, experience, a higher level of mindset and performance and all that
Mhm.
kinda stuff. And so it is very much true, and you can do that even if you don't physically move. You can a lot of times curate, even in the digital landscape, right? You can curate
Yeah.
your bubble, if you will, by cutting loose some things you don't want to see, and incorporating others that you do want.
Yeah. And you did it with a variety of things simultaneously. It was, your work environment, your marriage environment, your living environment, your income generation. You're like, holy moly. You had no
It was a
choice
radical
but to
change. Yeah.
completely reinvent yourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
very
It's pretty
radical
cool.
change. I mean, we had, like I've said, fortunately, we had some financial floor underneath us where it gave a safe environment to be able to do all that, and we also knew if this doesn't work, very likely we can get jobs, or pivot into something else. And
Well, let's talk about that. So it did work. We're here.
yeah, yeah.
You did really well with it. You've continued to persist. I'm sure you've gone through the ups and the downs and more downs than ups, like most of us. But when you actually realize, like, okay, I've become the CEO, so to speak. I've become the type of person that can really operate, generate revenue, change people's lives, change our lives, and keep this thing going and growing. When when did you really realize that, or what happened once you realized that?
Yeah, I don't know if I can think of a single moment when I kind of realized that. I think for me, probably when we started our coaching business, maybe 3 years ago, is when a realization that, okay, I can afford to step fully into something else and have this still run. That level of being able to almost step away, not entirely completely, but that is a proof point that, okay, now we're talking about more of a CEO type level activity. Um, Interesting to think about, but like, I usually have some form of a blueprint or a, um, goals or some, each year, when we started our journey, we put together what we call a blueprint, but it basically has vision statement, core values. Uh, I think it's probably might even be a 10-year vision, but for sure it's like in 5 years, kind of the things we want to go forward toward. And mine have always really, I think, because of my personality and because of what I was, talking about, being someone who likes a diverse aspect, or a diverse base of activities. Mine has always had some element of being, I don't think I phrase it as a CEO, but having a broad, um, almost running a portfolio of different businesses that maybe don't even relate to one another, but being able to do that in you can't really be in the business so much. You're more steering and
Mhm.
directing and meeting with
Right.
a team and making sure they're on the right, more of an advisory role or a CEO level type thing. And that's kind of always been on my roadmap since we've pivoted. I've wanted, because it is more of a coaching of a role, and that's what I really lean in on. When we went through our transformation, I hired a coach, a life coach, as well at some point in that journey to help with some of these exercises, like teasing out core values, ranking them, doing some vision work. Because I was trying to figure out what is it that I do want to do, and coaching came out of that a lot because as I explored my corporate days, really one of the things that really energized me as part of that experience was being able to coach and mentor and help other people grow. And so that was something that I knew going forward I really want to be somehow woven into my journey, whether it's explicitly as offering coaching services or at least in a business. But I would say in the land business, it was certainly being able to step away from that. And yeah, all of the things that come with that are just incredible degrees of freedom because when you're not the CEO, you're the bottleneck, right? I mean, it's like, and
Mhm.
I feel it in our coaching
Mhm.
business today because I'm doing a lot of work and I get so frustrated. Like, Pitchit will look at me and be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I have this list of things I want done today, and right now, I'm doing too many of them. And so I know like it's going to take me months to get these all done. And I need, if I wish I had more people to just go, hey, get this done, get that done, or whatever. And I'm just not at that place yet in our coaching business. And I know I'm going to get there. It's just frustrating me that we're not going as fast in that domain as I would like. Hey, it is what it is. But that's just where I see being the CEO is really essential to. It really is essential to speed. I mean, Dan Martell writes the book "Who Not How." There's many versions of it, but it is very true. Like, uh, but my personal hang up on this today is I've had some misses. We've hired some agencies. We've hired people. We've had hits and misses, and it's just the misses that hurt. It's like, gosh, I invested some money in this person or service. Eh, we lost time, whatever. It's just, and so those fear fear of failure is probably one of my biggest hangups coming from my background. Like I was a first
Mhm.
child. It was a performance focused childhood, academia, athletics. I was praised for good results. Then you get into the corporate world, and it's purely meritocracy, or okay, maybe it's not purely, but it's a lot of meritocracy driven type stuff. Um, and so that's probably been one of my biggest focal points as I moved from employee to entrepreneur. It's embracing failure, or not even failure, but experimenting, trying things, learning, iterating, growing and moving.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
had to do a real reframing. In fact, I've even kind of adjusted my value system such that I anchor on valuing learning and growth, and
Right.
that comes
Right.
through all these experiences. And I think Tom Bilyeu, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom
Yeah.
Bilyeu, but he was one that I heard kind of this concept of, if he did a very similar thing, a light bulb went off, and it led me to really lean in on raising up learning and growth as a one of my top values, so that I
Awesome.
would seek out these experiences, whether they missed or succeeded.
Well, and that's the huge, that is a huge shift in and of itself. When you go and you learn and you allow yourself to fail more because you learn more and you
Yeah.
just keep going and being able to embrace that, accept that, as you've said, that is obviously a huge reason for your success.
Yeah, and
We
I
have
try to
one
get
more.
failure out of my lexicon. Like, I don't even like to use the word anymore. It's just I don't know what to replace it with yet, but other than learning.
Just learning. It's learning. It's a first, remember, FAIL is first attempt in learning. I don't know if you ever heard that before, but it's a first attempt in learning. So you're just learning. That's all. That's how you got to look at it. So We have one more question to ask you before we go. Mm, Wanted to ask, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, make contact with you, and what would be the best way to contact?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, as you guys know. I mean, it's where we interact mostly, but you can follow me on LinkedIn at Michael B. Deaton, I believe is my handle. That's a great way to get in touch with me. On the business side, flippingdirt.us is our web URL. And so flippingdirt.us/freedom is really my podcast on ramp, if you will, for anybody listening or watching. I have a diverse, there's a few informational e-guides. You can schedule a call to, if you want to explore what land flipping might look like for you. Contact information is there. That's probably the best
Great.
centralized
Awesome.
location for people to go
Yeah.
and hit me.
And those will be included in our show notes with people listening. So that'll
Awesome.
be all down there. So check it out. All right,
All
Adam,
right.
go ahead. Hit him with the last question.
But yeah,
He's
so this
ready
is the
for
fun
it.
challenge. So, as we've said before we jumped on here today, we have a pretty diverse audience that watches and listens to us. And what we've noticed is there are a segment of them that are really looking to actually start their business. They may be that person that's considering, they may be the one that's buying the DVDs, maybe not DVDs, but they bought a digital course and it's sitting on the back of the desk, or they've just gotten laid off and they're like, what am I going to do next? And they've always had this thing in the back of their mind, maybe one day, maybe one day. So the challenge is we want to give these types of people a way to actually do this. And this still may be out of some of your reach, and that's fine. But what the challenge is for you is if you had, knowing everything that you know now, if you had to start all over again and you only had $10,000, whether it be actual money or a line of credit on a credit card, $10,000 is all you had, and you only had 2 hours a day to build this business. That's it. What would you do over the course of 1 year's time to build something that is sustainable enough where you can really consider leaning into this all the way?
Land is my obvious answer. We have people that do a couple hours a week, let alone a couple hours a day. And you can very easily turn $10,000. I mean, our land deals and the way we run them, we're doubling our money on our deals or better. And so you can really grow $10,000. You could spend maybe 20% of that in overhead, in, marketing, offer letters, things like that. You can even sign up for coaching and still have a good nest egg to get going. Beyond that, I would say that's a good chunk of change to get started with. Um, uh, Having been down this road for 10 years, we started our land business. We got into apartment investing, multifamily, commercial real estate. We've done our coaching business. In every step along the way, we have invested in coaching, and I do think regardless of what you want to do, it doesn't have to be a formal coaching program, but there's a lot of communities out there, masterminds, um, paid communities, even free communities. I think just for all the reasons we've talked about, identity transformation, um, mental support along the journey, let alone the tactical side of whatever business domain you want to go into. I really think that's fundamental to the journey. Now, the trick is finding the right program, coach, community. That is a hard thing to go about doing a lot of times, because it is a personal fit, and there's a lot of misrepresentation that happens out there in the WWW world. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would kind of go down those paths. Land is certainly tried and true for me personally, but outside of that, invest some of that. You don't have to invest all of it into coaching, and then there's so many things that you can do, like with hustle, just services. I mean, think about vibe coding apps, software. Like there's almost too many things that you can do at this point. It's kind of overwhelming, but that would be my biggest advice, I would say. But the main thing, honestly, I tell everybody. I mean, I get this form of a question quite often. The main thing is act, take action. Like don't spend a little bit of time learning and doing all that stuff, but you got to get off and get up and get moving. And it's just to that point of learning, right? First attempt in learning, you've got to start taking those steps, and you're going to make some
Hmm.
mistakes. You got to release that anxiety and allow it to happen, because really to get from current state to your destination, you just got to start moving, and know that you're going to make some mistakes along the way, and be okay with it. But for us, we've done the same thing, but we kept some tenacity and in going, and we just kept trying to improve every quarter, every year, and we have, honestly. And so that's just that maybe more than you guys were looking for, but yeah, that's kind of what I got to say about that.
I love it. Mike Deaton, thanks for being the CEO, pal.
Yeah, Adam, Tom, it was great to see you again. All the best.